Hello everyone. Welcome to the 27th webinar in 12D's training webinar series. My name is Lisa Stewart and I'm the Marketing and Communications Coordinator at 12D Solutions. While we wait for everyone to finish joining and get comfortable, I'll launch a polling question. You'll have about 30 seconds to answer about how long you've been using 12D model, and then I'll show the results. Okay, it looks like we've got quite a mix of attendees here today, but quite a few experienced users. Welcome everyone. Okay, let's get started. 12D's training webinars showcase common industry challenges, taking a close look at industry best practices and how these can be implemented using 12D model software. The aim of these webinars is to upskill 12D model users and broaden their understanding of the capabilities of 12D model. We run these webinars regularly and record them for posting through our website and on YouTube. The first 26 webinars from this training series, as well as 26 webinars from our Industry Solutions series, are available on our YouTube channels if you missed those. During this live presentation, you'll be able to type your questions along the way. We'll put instructions on the screen. We'll answer as many as possible of those throughout the webinar, and at the end, we'll read out some of your questions to the presenter if there's time. Today's webinar, Finding Things Fast in 12D Model, will be presented by Owen Thornton, who has been writing software for 12D Solutions since 2003. Owen has over 15 years of professional experience in the civil and mining industries. He's the original author of 12D's Drainage Network Editor and Drainage Analysis module, and is a 12D specialist in drainage, utilities, plot parameter files, survey conformance, volumetrics, and system setup. Over to you, Owen.
Thank you, Lisa. Today's webinar, Finding Things Fast in 12D Model, it's an introductory webinar, mainly intended for less experienced users, though experts may learn a thing or two today. I'm going to go through a few tips and recommendations on the use of 12D that will hopefully improve your productivity. These are things that I and many other of the 12D trainers regularly show at our training courses, and they're not necessarily specific to any particular discipline. They're just things that are good to know about 12D that are going to improve your productivity. Less mouse clicks, more knowledge of how the system works, good practice on conventions and things like that, and hopefully they will improve your experience with using 12D. Some of the features that I will be showing are new to version 12. A lot of them, though, have been around for years. Some of them you'll find in the first few pages of the reference manual if you ever read it. And a lot of people simply have never known about these things, and when they discover them, as I've learned over the years of giving training courses, they're amazed at, I wish I'd known this years ago, or something like that. So there might be a few things like that that you'll learn today, and hopefully that is the case. 12D Model is a big piece of software. It's got a very rich data structure. There's lots of aspects to it. You've got to effectively navigate your way through and manage projects. You've got to manage menus, toolbars, panels, views, functions, models, tins, strings, colors, names, and so forth. There are a lot of different bits and pieces that we need to work with, and we need to work with them effectively. So this presentation is going to show a selection of tools and a little bit of knowledge to make the whole job easier. So we'll start off with the menu in 12D Model. It is a rather big menu. Like I said, it's a big piece of software. So on the slide here I've listed, I'm not going to go through the entire menu, but I've listed the menu search bar, which is, I think, added in version 11 or maybe version 10. It's been around for a while, but still some people may not know about it. And I'm going to highlight a few useful options on some of the menu there, specifically under the project menu, the view menu, the utilities menu, and the help menu. And I'll highlight some of the things I've listed on the screen here. So I'll flip over to 12D now, and I've got a project open already. And I'll start off by saying, well, when I talk about the menu, that's all these things along the top there. And you can see there's a lot of different menu options. And how to navigate it all? Well, there is a thing called a search bar. And if you know what the search bar looks like, you might notice that it's not available on my screen at the moment. And if you've got a very old project that you've brought up to a new version of 12D, you might not have that search bar available. So the first thing to know, if you don't have the search bar, is how to turn on the search bar. And that is under the View menu. So we go to View, Toolbars. And this allows us to turn on all of the toolbars we have available. Now this is a customizable list, but this is what the list looks like straight out of 12D. There are a lot of toolbars available to turn on. I've only got a handful of them turned on at the moment. But I'm going to show you a few of the toolbars that I like to use. I'll go straight down to S for search, and I'm going to tick on the search bar. And that looks like this. And I can drag that and dock it anywhere I like on my screen. I'm going to dock it up there. That's normally the default location. I'm going to come back to the menu now and scroll back up. And I also like to turn on the Explorer, and I also like the Explorer Advanced. So I'll drag those into and dock them up the top there. So this is the Explorer menu. Toolbar, sorry, and the Explorer Advanced toolbar. And I like to have both. And one other one I'll turn on as well. And a lot of you will have noticed in version 11 and version 12 that these toolbars, a lot of them anyway, are turned on automatically for you anyway. It's only really if you've brought in an old project or you've got an old customization from a previous version that you might not have seen these. But the other one that I wanted to show today is the View Control toolbar. So tick on View Control, and I'll drag that one in, say, somewhere up here. Okay, but to start off with, the search bar is this thing here. And as soon as you click in it, it opens up this select option panel, and I can start typing something. So if I wanted to know what menu option I can use to calculate a volume, I'll type in the word volume. And every menu option that has anything to do with volumes in it is available in the list here. And it tells you exactly where on the menu you could go to. However, you don't even need to navigate the menu anymore. You can just click on it. So if I wanted to do a tin to tin exact, I would jump down and double click on this option, and it pops up the menu for me. And that is exactly the same as if I went to Design, Volumes, Exact, Tin to Tin. Exactly the same way to bring up that panel. So it doesn't just work with the word volumes, of course. You could type in anything else. I could type in conformance, and I'd find the survey conformance reports that are available under the survey menu there. And you can go to town and do whatever you like there with that search bar. So that is a good one to know about if you didn't already know about it. On the project menu, there's a lot of tools under here, but a couple of things I'll highlight. To get an overview of what is contained in your project, this option here, Project Tree, is a good one. So click on that. And it gives you a little tree structure here showing all of the components of your project, including model lists, and inside each model, the list of strings in each model. It gives you a list of tins and what model those tins reside in. It lists all of the templates and all of the functions and all of the views and so forth and so on. And it even gives access to symbols and line styles and so forth. So it's a good one to know about to give you an overview of what you have contained in your project. Other things you can do on the project menu, you can check how many points you have with this check base points. And that's a good one to know about. If you've got a points limited version, you want to make sure you're within those limits. Otherwise, 12D will start complaining that you've exceeded your points limit. You can under the details and management menus here, you can manage your environment. You can control and configure your dongles and your in 12D environment through this menu. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on how to do those things, but just to be aware that this is the spot where you would go to do those sorts of things. And one other useful one here that some people don't know about, under the 12D model menu there, it tells you exactly what version you're running, the date that the version was published, and how long you have remaining on your current license. So I have until May next year for my current license that I'm running this project with. So that's another good one to know about. Moving on to the view menu, I've already mentioned toolbars, and as I said, you can customize those toolbars, create your own toolbars, and turn on or off as many toolbars as you like. A lot of people love toolbars and have their screen filled with them. Other people prefer to use a mix of just a handful of toolbars and rely mainly on the menu system, and I probably fall into that camp. Again, that's a preference thing. Different people have different preferences, and we try to cater for all whims. The utilities menu I'll mention, I'll just gloss all over all these other menus right now and go straight to the utilities menu. A lot of people don't realize that some of the best options in 12D are hidden, if you like, or they are to be found within the utilities menu. Options that will do one process or another on a lot of data at once, not just one string at a time, but many strings. And most of these options are to be found in under utilities A to G or utilities H to Z. There's so many of them, we have to break it up into multiple menus there. And there's a ton of options to be found in there to do all sorts of things. Also, the superstrings menu is a handy one for manipulating superstrings. That's our most generic and flexible string type in 12D. And there's also an attributes menu there. There's all sorts of interesting things you can do with attributes on the attributes menu within the utilities menu. And lastly, on the menu, I'll mention the help menu. And that's not just to find the reference manual, which is this one. You can click on that and it should bring up a PDF of the reference manual, like so. And that's a large document, 8,000 pages or so. You don't have to read every page because the help works in a context-sensitive way. So if you have a panel open, it might be utilities A to G change, for instance, and you want to see how that works. You should just be able to press F1 and the manual will open up exactly at the right page to talk about that option. So that's good to know about that help menu. The other useful thing about the help menu, though, is you can use an option here called About 12D Model to find out what modules you have on your license. Do you have a particular module? So select this About 12D Model. It tells you what dongle you're using. It tells you what version you're running, the days remaining on your dongle. And it also lists the all-important list of modules, so what modules you have. And you can go and check whether they're turned on or off. When it says maintenance there, it means you get a module as long as your license is under maintenance, and so forth. You can turn modules off if you want to. It's more something that we do when we're testing the program. There's not much benefit for the average user to turn off a module. You can't turn them back on, though. Once you've turned them off, you have to restart 12D to do that. And you can't just come and turn them on yourself either. You need to talk to our sales department to make that happen. So that's all I really wanted to say about the menu system. We'll move on to another little bit of fundamental information here. And this has been covered in previous webinars in terms of setup and customization, but I wanted to reiterate it here in that because this is an introductory webinar, I want to reiterate that this is a fundamental thing to understanding how 12D model works. It is very difficult to follow how 12D model works until you understand the search path hierarchy of setup files, because setup files basically control how 12D works. So very briefly, when 12D model opens up a project or starts up a project, it goes looking for a large array of different setup files, or they're normally 4D files with a 4D extension, and it looks for them in the following order. It starts out looking in the working folder of the project. If it finds it, it normally stops. Some of the newer ones continue looking, but in general, if it finds it, it will stop looking. But if it doesn't find it, it continues to the next level. And the customer user level there, which could be defined as another folder it might be on your network that might have particular standards related to a client. If it doesn't find it there, or this is not defined, it will keep looking in your user folder. And this is where you normally have your company or office standards stored somewhere on your network or on your machine. And it might find it there, but if it doesn't, it will always have a backup or a fallback position where it will go to the setups folder. And this is a folder installed with 12D model. It should be under program files, and you should consider that a read-only. Even if you have admin rights, you should consider that a read-only folder. There's lots of great examples in there, but if you want to modify them or just tweak it a little bit, you should take a copy of it from the setups folder and copy it into any one of these levels above, and then 12D will find it there first rather than modifying the one in the setups folder. The reason being is that if you then upgrade your version of 12D, 12D will simply delete everything in this setups folder and delete any changes you may have made to it too. So something to be aware of there. I won't go into any more detail than that, but it is an important one to understand from the get-go. Another little very basic bit of information here on tins and models for tins. I see enough data coming in from various people to want to emphasize this a little bit. First of all, when we use the word TIN, it is an acronym. It stands for Triangulated Irregular Network, otherwise known as a triangulation. And it is just an element in the 12D model project database. Just like any other element, a string is an element, a piece of text is an element, and so is a TIN. A TIN does not have to be in a model, but if you want to view the TIN, you have to place it in a model. The reason being is you can only add models to views, and views are how you look at things in 12D model. So you must place a TIN in a model. And for TINs, we strongly recommend you always put a TIN in its own model with nothing else. So each TIN will have its own model, nothing else in that model but the TIN, and you name the model in a particular way. So whatever you've named your TIN, give it a unique name that is descriptive of what the TIN is representing. Name the model for the TIN with a prefix TIN space and then the name of the TIN. So if your TIN is named survey, the model for the TIN will be named TIN survey. And so it follows on from that you shouldn't put the word TIN in the name of the TIN, because otherwise your model name will become TIN survey and it just looks silly. Okay, so the reason we recommend this convention is a lot of the panels in 12D that relate to TINs or have or do something with TINs automatically work with that convention. It is possible to change the naming convention to some other variant, but 99% of our users will follow this convention. So if I go to TINs to create a super TIN, for instance, the first step is to give this new super TIN a name. Now, I normally prefix my super TINs with the prefix super, and I might call it, I'll call it demo for demonstration or demolition, depending on how you like to use that abbreviation. Now, I've just created that name. As soon as I hit enter in this TIN box though, you'll notice that the model for TIN is automatically programmed to be populated with the prefix TIN space. Obviously, if I'd put the word tin in my super tin, the model for tin would become tin tin super demo, and it would look silly. So that's the only point I'm trying to make there. Every tin should go, whether it's a super tin or a regular tin, every tin should go in its own model, and nothing else should go in that model. And don't use the word tin in the tin name itself. Save that for the model name. I now want to talk about views in 12D, and whether it's a plan view or a section view or a perspective view. We've got a number of different options available on views, and some new features in version 12 in the way we add and remove models from views. There's new search functionality that makes the job easier. That's the plus and minus buttons that you'll see on the views. I'll also be talking about the view properties icon on every view. At the top of every view, as you know, there's a bank of icons, and I've drawn a little, shown a little image of each of the icons I'm talking about there to try and emphasize or reiterate what each icon is otherwise known as. And I'll be talking about the properties icon, the clone icon, relatively new options. I think these are new in version 12, the favorites and positions. A few things have changed, not necessarily in version 12, but I think version 11, the look and feel of the toggles changed a little bit, and so I'll talk about that as well. And last one, this one is something that I very rarely see anyone modify, but it's something that I always do. So I like to mention this, text thresholds, being able to make sure that, or control when your text displays and when it doesn't, depending on your zoom level. So we'll go through all of those things now. First of all, I'll look at this view called design, and I can just press the plus button. And in version 12, it looks different from the way it did in version 11. It now pops up this dialog, and I can start typing things in here. Now, I don't have a huge model list in this project, but I can see already that all of my tin models begin with the word tin here. I've got 3 of them that aren't already on this view design. If I start typing the word in tin there, it only lists the ones that have the word tin in it. Now, there's some extra options here. I can turn on case sensitivity, which if I turned that off and I typed uppercase tin, it wouldn't find anything. And if I type lowercase tin, it finds it. Whereas I normally have that case sensitive off. It depends on how you name your models, whether you use uppercase and lowercase or a mix and things like that. You might find it's beneficial to go one way or the other. The other one here, this BB icon, is whether or not you want to match the whole word or not. Now, I find it's best to have that on most of the time. So once you turn it on a session, it remembers that for that particular view. And what that means is you get the functionality of old in version 11 and previous versions. For instance, if you knew all of your tins began with the letter T, or your tin models, I should say, begin with the letter T, you can hover over the plus button, and rather than just press the plus button, you can also just hover over the plus and press the T key on your keyboard. And that automatically then puts T star in this search box and lists your tins. If you don't have the whole word turned on, and you do that again, and I'll hover over the plus and press T, it just puts T in there and not the T star, and it lists everything that's got a T in, or possibly everything that's got a T in it, or maybe listing all the models there because we're not matching whole word. As soon as I put whole word in there, I do need to type the star going this way. The star is a wildcard character, and it means match anything after the first letter T. So there's some of the new features. There are other things up here that are available as well, and so forth, where you can features to manipulate models. But that's the main thing I wanted to show with the plus and minus. It works identically on the minus for removing things. These buttons work the same way. The other thing that's, and the next thing to show related to views is this icon here. It is known as the view properties, and it is a modern replacement. If I click on it there, it brings up this panel, and it is a very clean, all-in-one sort of place panel that contains almost all of the properties of a view, and it is the modern replacement for what we used to call, or still call, the view's own menu, which is this icon on the left of, or the leftmost icon on the view, and it has sort of an older style menu for bringing up various properties of a view. So this is sort of the modern equivalent, and you can sort of go to the settings branch here, or the tin settings, and change the way that contours are displayed, or change the way that solid filled polygons are displayed with the draw face fill and draw face edges, flags and things like that. You can turn grids on and off under here, and you can control the list of models and the model order on the view from this panel as well. So it's quite handy. Once you've got the properties of your panel the way you like them, another great feature that came in version 11, I think, is this icon just to the left of the properties icon. It's got two little sheets on there on the icon, and that's the clone button. Now, what it means is once you've got a view set up the way you like it, and if you want all of your other views to have those same properties, you should never have to go to the view create menu ever again, or the view new menu, because that will create a default view with default properties. It won't have the properties that you've just set on the view that you've set up. So the clone view, if I click on the clone view there, it immediately creates a new view called design copy. The previous one underneath it was called design, and I can rename it here. I can call it clone, and I can change any of the properties on the fly now too. I won't in this case. And finish. As soon as I finish, I have a clone view that is in all respects identical to the original design view. It's got the same list of models, it's got the same properties and everything. So that clone button is a good one to know about. We'll close that view down. I don't really need it cloned. The other thing though is, if you wanted to save a particular view for use in another project, you can do what's called a view favorite, and that's the little gold star here. So in that case, I can assume that, hey, I've got this view all set up the way I like it. I can click on the gold star and say create edit favorites. And I'm going to say, this is my favorite plan. And it's all set up there with all of the settings, including the model list. Like you might want to take that model list off, for instance. If I click on that, I can just clear that grid out and hit the right button there to save that file away. Now, you could save that to your user library folder so that it's available for other projects. So when you want to create a new view, you can refer to it. And the way you could use that there is when you go to create a new view in a brand new project that might not have any views, you can go to View, Create, Plan View, and here we can specify, I'm going to call this new, this view, and I'm going to use the favorites file that I just created, my favorite plan, and go ahead and create that one. Now this could be in a whole new project, and we could have browsed to the user library folder for this 12D VF plan file to create a new view with the properties that we like in our new project. If I go ahead and do that, it creates the new view there. This one, it's called new. It's got all the same properties as design, but it didn't have the models on it because I took them off. Okay, so that's a great option as well. The star to the right of the gold star is the blue star there, and that's for positions. Now, I've got a couple saved already here. I'll show you how they work in a sec, but if I click on the blue star, I can see I've got 2 positions saved for a plan view there. In this particular job, As you can see, it's a very simple job. I've got two intersections here. This is road 1, that's road 2, and that's road 3. I've got, so two intersections, I've called that intersection 1, 2 and intersection 1, 3. So I'm zoomed out to the maximum extents on this project, but when I've got this blue star plan view positions dialog up, I can click on or double click on one of these and it will zoom in to that intersection. I click on the other one, it zooms me to the other. So if you've got a big job with tons of intersections or all sorts of weird and wonderful areas of interest, you can save away these position files like so. The way to do that, let's imagine now I'll zoom back to my maximum extents. Let's say that this cul-de-sac bulb up here is an area of interest. I'm going to zoom into that with my wheelie mouse. Sorry, I hope I didn't just, with all that zooming, I may have pushed the national broadband network to its limits there, and my voice might have sounded a bit funny. I forgot about that. Let's say that I want to save this as a favorite position. I can go back to the gold star here and say create edit positions. And I'll call this positions file. I don't really need to do anything with the branches here. You can click on the viewport and change text there if you want to, but if you've already zoomed in on the view where you want it, I might call this cul-de-sac 2 and hit the right button and finish. And I can zoom back to my maximum extents there. And anytime I want now, I can click on the blue star, click on cul-de-sac 2, and it zooms me back to that position. So you might find that's handy. It's especially handy on perspective views, for instance. So here you can see a 3D perspective view of all of the data in this job. I've used translucent tins here. And you can see all of the services and things like that underneath. I've got communications lines and water mains and sewer lines and drainage lines and an existing gas line that meanders through this project. It's just a dummy project that's good for demonstration and testing. But if I zoom to the maximum extents of this view by just clicking on the view fit, it zooms me right out. And or if you're otherwise using the orbit and you get a bit lost in your orbit, you can always find your way back. Now I've got a favorite for the perspective view saved called eastward. I can click on that, double click on that, and it brings me back to where I was. And I can use the orbit. And I'll try not to talk while I orbit, but I can move around. Like so, and say, oops, I can go underground. Checking for crossing services and all sorts of things like that. If I get a bit lost though, I click on the blue star and go back to eastward. And it works the same way. If I wanted to make one looking the other way, for instance, I'd simply arrange my view, and I'll stop talking while I do this to stop my voice going funny. Use orbit now, and so here I might decide that that's a good view looking westwards now. So I go to the gold star and say create edit positions, and I'm going to type in westward. And basically for a perspective view, it's basically just saving the eye and target position of the perspective view. So once you write that away, finish, I can then do a view fit or go anywhere in this perspective view, and I know that I'll be able to come back to the blue star and hit westward, and I get my view back. So it's a good way to manage your perspective views and things like that. Other things to note on views, still on the topic of views, With the toggle icon, that's the tick cross icon that you see on all of your views. Around about version 11, I think it was, the look and feel of these changed a little bit. And when you hover right, say if I were to go down to Z values, I can turn all the Z values on the entire view, which puts an awful lot of text on the screen. Or I could toggle vertices on and see all of the little cyan vertices everywhere. But if you hover right on the little black arrow there on any one of these options for toggling things on and off, you can do it on a model by model basis. So if I just wanted to toggle the vertices on my sewer model, for instance, you'll see that it has this two columns. It's got the model name on the right and the state column, and there are 3 states. And the trick here, it's not immediately obvious. You need to right-click on where it says View there. And when it says View, that means it's using the default view setting that we set at this level here on the toggle menu. When I go back into the hover right menu, the sub-menu, and I right-click on the word View there, I get 3 options, View, Off, and On. So the view means use the default settings at the higher level. Off means explicitly turn them off for this model. That's the vertices. Oh, in fact, I'm in the Z values, my mistake. Vertices is what I wanted to turn on for sewer. And on means explicitly turn on the vertices for this one model sewer. So if I select on now, it's turned on the vertices on my sewer model. I've got a couple of property controls in there as well that are showing up as well. And I see the little cyan crosses on my sewer model. If I were to turn all of the vertices back on, I'll see all of the vertices. If I turn all of the vertices back off, I don't see the vertices apart from the sewer model that I had explicitly turned on. If I go back to vertices now, and turn that from on to off, and I come back at this level, at the upper level, and toggle vertices, turn the vertices on, turn the vertices off. That's done something that I didn't expect it to do. I would have thought that it would explicitly have turned those off, but it doesn't appear to, so that has taken me by surprise. In any event, if you want to set it back to the way of the default upper level setting, you set it back to view. And that's all I really wanted to show, explain this sort of change in the look and feel and the way that the toggles work and these 3 states, view, on, and off. The last thing I wanted to show with views was a thing called the text threshold. And I notice not many people know about this one. I see that very few people actually bother with it. But on my view, if I start zooming out, and I'll do this slowly, you can see there's these text labels along my alignment string. On most people's views, they'll begin to disappear when the text gets small, but I don't know about you guys, but I like to see, even though I know I can't read the text when it gets that small, I like to know there's a little bit of text there. And so I don't like my text to disappear, especially when you're looking at plot models as well. Before you know, an A1 sheet on a screen doesn't look very big. And if you can't see that there's a bit of text somewhere, it looks like something's wrong. So I like to see, even if I can't read the text, I want to see a little blob on the screen to say, oh, there's a bit of text there. The setting to control that, I wish I could tell you it was under the properties panel that I showed before, but as yet, it hasn't yet been added. It's something for a future version, I would say. So I'm going to go back to the old school view zone menu here, and under settings, go down about 1/3 of the way, and there's an option there called text. You can either click on the word text or hover right and go to text. That does the same thing, and it brings up this little panel here called plan text. And I've already gone and done this. I've set my threshold values for the quick and the none threshold to 0. I can't remember what the default values are. I think it's 4 and 2 or something like that. Hopefully I've done that the right way. As soon as I set those, my text disappears until I zoom in. to a particular level. And then once I've got to a particular zoom level, I see a little zoom text extents box there, because 12D considers that the text is still too small to actually read it, so it doesn't bother drawing it. The intention of the threshold is to speed up view drawing, but sometimes you still want to see whether there's text there or not. So that's something that I tend to use, especially on views that have got plot models on them. And it's buried here under the settings text, and you can set those thresholds to 0 and set, and it means that your text will always draw on the screen no matter what your zoom level is. Okay, so I can zoom right out, and I can still see the little blobs of text there, even though I can't possibly read them. So that's all I had to say on the topic of views. The next slide I have here is a little bit of a hodgepodge of panels and strings, ways to use panels in slightly more effective ways that are related to string properties as well. So I'm going to talk about the source box, which, if you don't know, is an element of a lot of different panels in 12D. It's this thing here. You've probably seen it, and you might have been wondering how to use it most effectively. I'll try and show that. The next two are screen layout files and dialog default files. I'm still amazed in the training courses I give, the number of people who tell me they don't know what a screen layout file is, or they don't know what a dialog default file is. This, understanding at least a screen layout file and knowing how to use them is the beginning of making your program or your projects repeatable. Okay, you can go to the next level and use chains, but the first step before you even go to chains is to learn about screen layout files. So I'll show you what they are, and I'll show you the difference between a screen layout file and a dialog default file. A couple of other little tricks here. I'll show you what Control D does in a panel. When you're in a model box or a color box or a choice box, that's a very handy one. And also how the middle mouse button can work inside a panel for doing a same as and picking a property of an element off the screen rather than having to select it from a drop-down list. And I'll also show you these two. These are two of my favorite panels in 12D for sort of debugging or finding funny data that may have been provided to you. It's a great way of finding strings and models in a project, so I'll show you those as well. So back to 12D now. I'll start off with the source box, and I'll show you a few things about the source box. The option I'm going to use to show off the source box is something I often show in my drainage training. It's an option that doesn't get used much anymore except by drainage people. It used to be used a lot for labeling old alignment strings with their chainages, but with the advent of the super alignment, this option doesn't get used so much as anymore. It's label chainages on a string, and it does have one particular mode here, this label mode, that makes it great for drainage people, because drainage people generally want to locate the crests and sags on their design. Okay, so if I have this design here on the left, I want to go and locate, out of all the strings on this view, I want to locate all of the crests and sags on just the curb invert strings. I don't want to label everything. I don't want to label the center line. The road designer has probably already marked the crest and sags on the center line, but the water doesn't flow towards the center line. It flows towards the curb inverts. And that's where I'm interested in the high points and the low points from a drainage perspective. Now, to do that, you can use this source box, and this is what the source box is, and it's common to a lot of different panels. It's a very common feature in 12D, so it pays to know how to use it. Now, you can just select an individual string or a model or everything on a view. If you really want to go to town, though, and do a sophisticated selection, you want to use this second last icon called the filter icon. It looks like a little funnel or an upside down or a coffee filter from an old coffee machine. Okay, so click on that. It opens up a whole bunch of tabs here. Now, at this point, you could say, well, I've got pretty much all the strings I'm interested in on this view, but I've got more than that. Yes, you could select the view there, but I don't think that's a very good way of doing it, because ideally we want to make this panel repeatable so that we can run this over and over. In civil design, things never get done in one pass, and you generally have to have a few cracks at it. And when we're in this particular application, we're labeling the crests and sags on the curb inverts. Well, every time the design changes, the road design changes, the crests and sags are likely to move as well. So we're going to have to make this panel in such a way that we can rerun it easily. We don't want to have to come back at the next iteration and have to fill in this panel from scratch. So the reason I say don't choose a view here is because we can't rely, by the time the next iteration comes around, that all of these same models are going to be on this view. You're better off using an explicit list of models or using a wildcard. I'll show the explicit list first. So I'll go to the Models tab here, and this allows us to select a list of models. If I right-click in the grid cell there, it brings up my model list, and I could go in one by one. It's basically all my design strings models that I'm interested in, but that's a little bit boring. So a quick way to fill in a grid, and this is nothing, not just related to the source box, basically anywhere where you've got a grid in 12D, there are things called populators. And how a populator is activated is you take the column in the grid, the header column there, and you right-click on it. In my case, I right-clicked on the word model on the header of the column there, and I get an option to populate models. And I might select the view at this point and say, well, right at the moment I have this view called design, which happens to have all the models I'm interested in. And I can just click on my view button there and select design and go and populate. And that fills in the grid for me. And that's got listing all of the explicit lists. Now in truth, I don't need all of these models, and I can pull some of them out if I don't need them. Just highlight the ones you don't need and delete. And it's really just, this is the list of models that I'm interested in that contain all my curve invert strings. That's one way of doing it. That's a nice explicit list. And that's going to work as long as, you know, no more roads get added to this project. But if you look at the naming convention here, all of my design models have or my design string models have a regular naming convention. They all start with the word design and they all end in the word strings. Well, if that naming convention is maintained, there's an even better way. So I'm going to clear that out and instead go to the model branch, singular model. And a lot of people don't know this either, but around version 11, I think, a little feature snuck in to the name box here where we can specify a model, which means it allowed us to type in a wildcard. Okay, so I can type in design star strings, and that will match all of the models in my project that match that naming, where the star matches any characters in between the words design and string. I can hit the filter select button here and it will tell me it's highlighting, and you can see it highlighting on the perspective view there in a sort of a pale yellow color. It's highlighting all of the strings, 102 strings from 4 different models, like so. Now that's got all of the models I want. In particular, I wanted to label just the curb invert strings. So in addition to the models, the model singular tab there, I'm going to go over to the string info tab and I'm going to specify a name. Now, if you don't remember your string codes, you can go and look them up. You can do an F2 inquire on your strings and figure out what the name is. You could possibly go to the name box there and go looking for it in that tree. But if you hover your mouse over that name box there and you look at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, there's a little prompt there in black text that says name, and then 3 words in square brackets, and then select a button. It says carré, same as, and menu. Now those 3 sets of square brackets are telling you what the 3 mouse buttons do in this context when your mouse is hovering over the name box on a panel. And the left mouse button, carry, just means put the flashing cursor in the box. I just left-clicked in there and now I have a flashing cursor in the box. That's no big deal. The right mouse button says menu. If I do that, I get a little context-sensitive menu where I get a few options to change from upper to lowercase and do Unicode characters and things like that. What's the really useful one, though, is the middle mouse button that says same as. And in fact, if I hover my mouse over any of these fields here, I get a same as in almost all of them. And what that means is, on the name box, I can middle mouse button, you click on the middle mouse button or the wheel inside the name box, and then I can go and zoom in and pick a string that I actually am interested in the name of. So I'm going to just zoom in, say, there. And my curb invert is that string there. It says it's KIL. I picked the left-hand side of the road there. As soon as I accepted that selection, it's taken the name of the string I selected on the view and placed it into the box there. So each one of these different widgets on the panel knows what kind of widget it is. So this is a name widget, this is a color widget, that's a style widget. When you use that middle mouse button, same as, whatever you select, it pulls the relevant information off that string and places it in the box. In my case, my naming convention for a curb invert is KI, and it's either got an L or an R suffix. Well, I want to apply this to both sides of the road, so I'm going to replace that L with a star, and that will find all of the curb inverts on both sides of the road in all of the 4 design models. I hit filter select, and I can see on my perspective view it's only highlighting the strings, the curb invert strings. Okay. Now, that selection process of selecting all of the curb invert strings, that took us a few minutes. And there might be another panel, there might be 5 other panels that have source boxes in 12D that have nothing to do with labeling chainages, but they've got a source box on them. And you might want a fast way of selecting all of your curb invert strings on another panel. And this is what the star is for on the source box. And I've asked this question in virtually every one of my training courses, and no one has yet told me they've ever used this star. And I'm always surprised by that, because I find it quite useful. Click on the star here, and it allows me to create what's called an SBF file. That stands for source box favorite. So I go down and hit create now, and I'm going to create a source box favorites file, and I'll name this based on what I've set up the source box to select, and that is my curb inverts. Hit enter in that box and it automatically puts a .sbf extension on the file. All file boxes work that way. They're all programmed to know what extension it's expecting, and it will automatically put it on when you press enter. Go ahead and hit create there, and it will create this thing in your working folder. Big deal. You might think, well, I can come back to any panel now in 12D, and I could come back to utilities A to G change. This is one of my favorite options, utilities A to G change. All the best stuff is squirreled away in the utilities menu. And on here now, I can select the star, the favorites on the source box, and select that curb inverts, and it's filled in the source box for me exactly as I had it on this completely different panel on the left, except that they both have a source box. And so it's a quick way to select data that you may be selecting repeatedly. Okay? So that's one good thing to know about. The other good thing to know about, and I'm not going to fill in the bottom section of the panel here, I'm not actually interested in locating the crest and sags. I want to show you how panels work. And that is screen layout files and dialog default files, because you may spend 10 minutes or so filling in a panel, and you may want to save that away for reuse. To do that, you can click on the little 12D icon, and virtually all panels in 12D, with a few exceptions, have the ability to be written out to screen layout files or dialog default files. In this case, I'm going to create a screen layout file, and if you've never seen these before, this is the best thing you can do to get yourself started in automating your projects and doing the quality assurance for you. So I'm going to rename this. You can name these, you can have any number of screen layout files for a panel depending on how you fill in the panel, and it's going to save all of these details away. So I could call this label crests and sags, and hit dump. Let's save that away in my working folder, and I can accidentally hit the finish button now and know that even though I haven't run the panel, I can always bring it back via File, Layouts, Layout Input, and I can bring back my screen layout file, and it brings back the panel exactly as I wrote it out. The other thing you can do with a screen layout file is you can run it in a chain. Now, chains are a superior option to screen layout files, but one of the things you can do in a chain is you can run a screen layout file. So if you're not yet familiar with chains and you're only starting out in 12D, get the hang of screen layout files first and write each panel out to a screen layout file. And then it's very simple to create a chain that just says run a screen layout file. It doesn't even pop up the panel, it just runs the panel behind the scenes in the chain, and that's a great way to get started too. Okay, there were a couple of other things I wanted to show on this panels and strings. One was I mentioned Control D in a model box. Let me go back to this model box there and say, well, let's look at another option there. Rather than using the wildcard there, let's say I wanted to pick a particular model. And I'll just type in, say, the first few letters of a model I might be interested in. I want to be interested in all of the models that begin with DE, for instance. I type in DE and hit Control D. So you have to imagine I'm pressing Control D on the keyboard now. Hold down Control and press D. And what it's done is it's worked like predictive text on a mobile phone. It's looked at all of the models available in your project and said, well, this is the listing of all the models that began with DE. In fact, they all begin with design, and it's put in design space star in there. And it gives me a reduced list. You could have thousands of models in your project. This will just list the ones that begin with DE, for instance, or design. And it works with any prefix you put in. So that Control D is very handy. It works in model boxes, like I've used there. That's a model box. It also works in choice boxes. So if you had your drainage pit types or your drainage pipe types, it works in those choice boxes as well. It also works in color boxes. So on my perspective view, for instance, you know, I'm a drainage guy, and I always like to change the nice pretty blue sky on a perspective view to something dark gray or something deep blue or something like that, because in drainage terms, it's always raining hard and the sky is dark. It also improves the contrast. That's the real reason when I've got these translucent tins, I find it gives me a better contrast. So I can click on the properties panel here and change my background color. Now you can see here it's automatically set or preset there with a background color called Viz Sky. You can look at all of the Viz colors on your color list there. By default, they show up. But if you just wanted to show the Viz colors, you could type in VI or VIS and hit Control D, and it just lists the Viz colors now and nothing else. Okay, another thing though is if I wanted a particular deep shade of blue, like it's the middle of the night with a nice clear sky, good for astrophotography or something, I could type in the first few letters of the color blue and hit Control D. And that lists not just the color blue, but all of the graduated shades of blue that weren't showing up in our default drop-down list of colors. There's a lot more colors available than what you see in the drop-down, and you can customize that and change that if you want, but you can use this Control D functionality to bring that up as well. So I might change it to this very nice deep blue color there very easily, and that Control D works nice. You know, there's all sorts of other colors. There's PPF colors as well. For using plot parameter files, I won't change that. I'll change it back to the way it was. Blue 56, I think it was, and finish. And now to my eyes anyway, I like the look of this perspective view a little bit better. It's not meant to be realistic. We're seeing through the road, for goodness sake. We can see all of the underground pipes. It's not meant to be realistic. I'm looking for a nice contrast there, and I quite like the way the darker color looks there. So that's a little bit about panels and strings. The last couple of things I wanted to say, and I know I'm running a little bit over time, so I'll wrap things up pretty quickly. Under the models menu, there's these two options here, model info table, and that lists all of the models in your project and gives you minimum and maximum extents for the X, Y, and Z, and tells you how many elements and points there are. It's a great way of finding errant models in your project. And if you find an errant model or a model of interest, you can double click on it. For instance, I'll click on the drainage model and it lists the strings you have in each individual model. If I move that panel off to the side there, it gets better than that. I'll fit my view again. I can click on the individual strings in my panel here, and I'll click on string 1 there, and it puts a dirty grey crosshair on the view telling me where that string is. Click on string 2 and it tells me it's over there. It's a great way of finding data and checking the extents. If somebody's given you some data with some crazy X values or Y values or Z values, you can find them here. So I'll mention that just briefly. It's a great little debugging tool available from the models menu, the model info table, and the string info table. Okay, there was one last thing I wanted to show you. I think I've covered everything there. I didn't mention dialog defaults files. They're very similar to screen layout files, but I'm running short on time, so we might have that in a question afterwards if anybody wants to ask a question. The last thing I've mentioned is a little thing on functions here. Anonymous functions are a great little tool, and they often happen automatically without you realizing. But just so that you know, whenever you read data into 12D model, an anonymous function is created automatically, whether it's a 12DA file or a DWG file or any other file format pretty much. You read it in and we can track where that data has come from. So as an example, we can use the edit func data on the recalc menu to quickly find the source of our external data. So let me quickly create some external data. I'm going to read in a 12DA file, 12D archive file. I'm going to go to the library and read in one that's called the Drainage Brisbane City Council Gully Type A drawing. So I want to see a reference drawing now, and I've got it saved away as the 12DA file here, and I'll read that straight into 12D. And that's created these extra models here in my projects. And I can zoom in on them if you're interested and have a look at any of these. It's quite a useful little thing for those of you using the Brisbane City Council pits. Zoom, can't use the zoom. Get there in a sec. There we go. And it's got all sorts of little details about how these different pit types work. Okay. If I do an F2 inquire on any of these, and I should have the super inquire filled in there, it actually says that it's got a section there on function. And it tells me that there's a function related to this string I've just selected called read 12D solutions archive data. And in fact, if I look at my function list, I've only got one function. It's the function that was just created when I read that file in. And I can use the edit func option there. Just click on the word edit func on my recalc menu, which is available from utilities recalc. And we can bring up the recalc menu that way. Click on edit func and click on any one of these strings we've just read in. And it brings back the panel that I just used to read in, and I can find out exactly where this data came from. And it's a great way to track and keep track of the files that you read in from external data sources. Okay, so just a little thing to know about anonymous functions there. Just in closing now, I know I've gone a little bit over time. I hope I haven't ruined your lunch. The 12D project I showed in this webinar, I'm hoping it will be installed with the next version of version 12. I'm not 100% sure that it will be, but I'm thinking it will be installed here. It may have a slightly different name. In any event, it's got some good example chains in there and some good example plot parameter files, and the chain is set up to produce a whole series of drawing sheets for some new public work style of plot parameter files that we're hoping to standardize around the traps. So if you're interested in getting a copy of the training data that you've seen in this webinar, wait till the next version of 12D is released, 12C1H, I'm hopeful, and hopefully you'll find it in the location here, C12 under C12D12 training. And just a little disclaimer at the end, this is a very broad topic to cover. I've quite possibly failed to show your favorite way to improve your productivity in 12D model. I've shown some of the ways that I find improve my productivity. There are so many ways that you can improve your productivity. I apologize if I couldn't cover the one that was your favorite or the one that you think was most important. It was kind of inevitable that I'm going to miss some. I think I need to wrap things up there though, so I will pass things back to Lisa now, and we'll have a quick question and answer session.
Thanks, Owen. Yes, we'll race through these. I'll just read out two, I think, today, just for time constraints. So James in Brisbane has said, how can you make more colours appear in the colour drop-downs?
Yep, that one is controlled from the defaults menu. If I can have control back to show 12D again. Under Project Management Defaults, you can go to the System Settings tab on this. This is a whole bunch of project defaults that are saved with the project. And it's this display colors setting there. And the way that works is you know, you don't necessarily know off the top of your head how many colors you want, but if you're not seeing the full complement of colors in your drop-down list, and this is, we're showing 90 colors here, which includes all the standard colors and the shading colors and the pen weight colors and the visualization colors. Well, you can open up and have a look at all of the colors. If you click on any color box in 12D and go down to Edit here, you can bring up the colors.4D. And this is every color in 12D. It goes down for thousands of lines, down to line 800, well, hundreds. And I can sort this file using the little widget down the bottom here by pop-up number, because it's the pop-up number that's critical in determining which colors show up and how many colors you want to show up. So sort that by pop-up number. And this relists everything. And if I scroll down to the magic number display colors 90 there, which is here, you can see that's the end of the visualization colors when they're sorted by pop-up number. If I were to change that number to 100 there, I would also get the first 10 AutoCAD colors if you're into that sort of thing. So I can change the display colors on the defaults menu there to be 100 and hit set and finish and finish. And on any color box now, I will not only get the first 90 colors, I will also get the next 10 as well, the AutoCAD colors. So that's how you do that.
Thanks for that. And John in Melbourne would like to know, is it better to run separate SLX files from chains or to record panel options into chains directly?
That's a difficult one to answer in terms of it's really a preference thing. I'd probably say that if you've never used a chain before and you've never used a screen layout file before, I'd say get the hang of screen layout files to begin with, and then run those screen layout files in a list in a chain, and start out learning chains that way. Once you get the hang of it, though, you may find that that step of having the intermediate step of creating the screen layout file is a bit unnecessary, and you can record them directly into the chain. Effectively, what a chain stores when you record a panel into a chain is a little snippet or a little portion of a screen layout file for each option. So it's not much difference in terms of underneath the hood there. It's just that the mechanics of getting it all working in the chain is a little bit different. So recording an option into a chain is arguably a little bit more pointy-clicky involved, but you don't have to create the screen layout file in advance, and there's pointing and clicking involved in that. So I think the answer is a little bit uncertain there, but try it just with screen layout files in the first instance, and if you get bored with that, you can try the record option and see which one you prefer.
Perfect. Thank you, Owen, and thanks to the audience for your great questions. I'm sorry to those we couldn't get to live today, but we'll answer you by email soon. The recording of this webinar will be available in coming days through our website and our YouTube channel. Our next two training webinars are 12D Model in the MTF Part 2 on the 9th of August and Attribute Manipulation on the 6th of September. So do keep an eye on our website for details of those, as well as our upcoming industry solutions topics. We'll also continue to keep you posted through email and social media. If you need to contact us in the meantime, our details are on the screen now. That concludes our presentation for today. Thank you for attending, and we hope to see you at future webinars.